So hi everyone, my name is Dana and welcome back. If you haven't had a chance yet, please do click that QR code or use that link there or in the chat to register your interest and get some free resources from Microsoft. And as always, we have Lucas staying with us to give us a great session, this time about ARM. Is that right? Yeah.
Yep.
So over to you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Dana. I would also like to welcome everyone to today's session. This is our last session in series Cloud Launch and Learn on topic of Azure governance and automation. And today we are talking about how to start with Azure ARM templates. Right, those are our series. Though a recording from the previous sessions should start appearing on our YouTube channel soon, so you should be able to go back and catch up all those sessions if you missed some of them or if you need it for reference to repeat something, which is great. My name is Vukašin Terzic. I work as a cloud solution architect for a company called KPCS that is based in Prague in Czech Republic. I am currently in Malta. A few months back, I was also recognized as a Microsoft Azure MVP. And if you want to get in touch with me for any reason, these are the best places to get to me. I've worked with Azure for, I think, 5-6 years now. And before that, I was working mostly in Windows Server infrastructures and virtualization. And automation was always a huge part of my work. I think that way back when I learned PowerShell, that was like the biggest change in everything I was doing. And I always preferred automation over the manually doing things. And even now with Azure, I also try to automate everything and deploy infrastructure in a form of code. And luckily, I have a lot of tools to do this in a simpler way than before. And so using ARM templates is something that is close to me. And I'm glad that you are here today for this session. I think that 1 hour is not enough to make you an expert in ARM. But I'll try to cover the basics today, and I think this should be enough for everyone to understand what using ARM template is all about and to start using it on your own. Of course, there are some things that we will not be able to touch today to talk about, some more advanced ways of deploying infrastructure, but I think for the beginning, this is more than enough. So before you can actually understand what ARM templates are about, we have to look at the infrastructure as a code. I'm not going to have too many slides today. I purposely didn't put too much information on it because I think it's more important to think about things than just to read things. So as the name infrastructure as code mentioned, infrastructure as code is a process and methodology and a way of deploying our infrastructure and resources as a code, not doing it manually. And for example, I don't know, instead of going to Azure portal, going to new resource, then creating a new resource and clicking everything, typing everything, instead of doing that, we can prepare a piece of code and let that code do it for us. So benefit of that, I think that everyone can immediately see here, is that this is something that is repeatable in easy way. Once you write the code, you can run that code every time and it will execute exactly the same every time, and it will be much faster. So you might spend a little bit more time preparing the code, but then you can use that over and over and over again and save you a lot of time. So it's also faster. So in case you declare or write the code for more than just one resource, but let's say for the entire environment, then running that code will execute much faster than if you go and sit there and just try to do it on your own. It will save you a lot of time. Also, it will save you money because time is money. And there will be no errors. Like in case you are trying to deploy many things at the same time, there is a huge chance that you as an administrator who is doing it manually will do something wrong. You can, let's say, do a simple thing like use the wrong name, or you can deploy it in a wrong region, or you can do something not in the correct order, and then something will not work, and you will spend time troubleshooting and so on. And so when you create a code and make your infrastructure as a code, then you of course have to test it, have to make that code work, but then it will work every time. It's there, it's tested, and it will work every single time. And this is great. Also, it's probably more secure because you don't have to give someone full access, for example, to go and dig in all the and do all of this for you, or make some mistake that will introduce some security vulnerability. And so what we can also do when we have this kind of code is that we have to use it on different environments. So we can take it, put it in a different subscription, run it there, put it in a different Azure tenant, run it there again, and we get the same result every time. So in a smaller deployments, like if you try to deploy one single virtual machine, those benefits will not be visible. It will probably take you more time to prepare some kind of code than to just go and click and create one virtual machine, right? But if you are trying to make a highly complex environment that has a lot of different components in it, a lot of different resources in different places. They have to be configured in specific orders. Those resources have to be like even changed or managed. Then of course, those benefits of having infrastructure as a code are huge, and they save a lot of time. Another benefit that maybe people don't realize is that when you write something in a code and you deploy it from that piece of code, then at that moment you have a documentation. You have a code that you use to deploy it, which means that your environment is exactly as written there in that code. And usually, like, this code is easy to read, and it can even be like parsed because it can be a JSON file, for example, and you can like export things from that JSON file and put them, I don't know, in Excel or something else. There are tools that are already doing this for you, so you can use it as your documentation that can be in a way of the code, or if you want to present that to someone who cannot read the code, then you can also export it and create like Word document or Excel file where all this information will be, and you know for sure that it's like that because you deployed it from that script. And this is, for me, this is perfect because you save a lot of time trying to go and like, I don't know, change something and find out what did you change and then put it back in documentation. My personal experience is that even if I tried to create the best possible documentation upfront on the paper in the Word document, and then we presented it to customer approved, and then we started implementing things, there is like a huge chance that you will not implement it exactly as you put it in a Word document. That can be for simple reasons, like, I don't know, you put something in a name and then you find out that the Azure name is not supported, so you have to make it shorter, or maybe capital letters or small letters or something like that. Or it can be something, of course, more, let's say, more complex reason why you were not able to do it as designed. And then in any case, you have to go back and change your design and put all those things in the end back to it as in the way you created it. And so for me, that's like a huge waste of time and pain. And that's why I like to declare everything in the code, infrastructure. Then I just deploy it, and I know it is exactly as I deployed it. Of course, if that deployment fails, because I don't know, I try to use a name that is too long, then it's not deployed, and I have to change the name and deploy it again. But the moment that the deployment is successful, I know that I have my code there. Right. So those are some benefits of it. Also, infrastructure as a code should, there is like the thing that everyone is thinking about only about deployments. And infrastructure as a code is not only about deploying new resources. Of course, that's the beginning. That's something that everyone starts with. You go and you have an empty subscription. You type in some, create some deployment code, and you create new resources. Okay, that's possible. It's a great thing because it saves you a lot of time. But infrastructure as a code can also be used in the situations when you have to change the configuration. So you shouldn't be like using it just to deploy new ones, and then you have to change, I don't know, VM size, and then you go and do that manually. No, that should also be kept in the code and should be maintained in a code as a code basis. And then there is like the commissioning process, which is the third part of it. And then again, that's something where you can use infrastructure as a code and just like remove or decommission those resources in a proper way. So your code is always the place where you will go to. Of course, like the reality is that in most environments, some small changes that need to happen quickly will happen manually. People will go to Azure portal or they will run some PowerShell and make those changes. And that's not reflected back in the infrastructure as a code, but that puts you in a situation that if you have to redeploy your environment, then you actually don't have the most up-to-date code. And well, actually, I didn't mention the huge benefit of having the infrastructure as a code is, of course, that in case something goes wrong, in case you lose your environment, then you have this script that you can run and quickly redeploy it and have everything back again. And in some scenarios, that will help you like completely build in your infrastructure, and then you can, I don't know, recover your data from the backup and just attach it to the VM that you recreated from your script, from your template. And also there are like different recovery scenarios here where you will use specific image and deploy always the same, or also like scalability scenarios when you want to deploy like a new environment over and over again. It's either for testing purposes or like, let's say you have a new customer and you are deploying for them, let's say each customer need to have a server, the database, and then the public endpoint and so on. So of course, for those purposes, you can have everything declared as a code. And then when you get a new customer, you just run something and you get everything ready for them without doing things manually. And so that's what the infrastructure as a code is all about. And then I'm sure that most of you tried to, let's say, automate something in Azure. We have some questions. Sorry. Sorry for interruption. So there is a question from VY. Yes, so that was the only thing on the screen. I didn't put any I didn't put any extra slides on it. I hope everyone can see the screen is just now like one slide with the title. If you don't see that, please let me know. So I will continue. So I'm sure that most of you tried to deploy something or automate something in Azure, and that's great. I'm guessing that you tried to create something, let's say virtual machine, using the Azure PowerShell. You try to do that in a portal or on your local computer. You connect it to your Azure. You deployed something, changed something, and those are the great tools. But those tools are using something that is called imperative approach, and basically that means that if we are creating a new virtual machine, let's say in Azure, we need to run several commands in sequence and let's say create a resource group, create a storage, create a virtual network, create a subnet, create that virtual machine, attach it to that network, and so on and so on. And during this process, we are defining what should be created. That means first we define VM size, VM name, region in which we are putting it, and so on. And then we are executing those commands to create those resources or make those changes. And that's, of course, called imperative approach, which is used on many places. And for some quick changes or for some tasks like this that are supported, let's say in PowerShell or Azure CLI, then that's great, right? We can do that. It's probably easier to do it this way because if you're already using PowerShell, then for you this is basically nothing new. However, in the ARM templates, on the other hand, we have completely different approach. And this is called declarative approach. And here we don't take care of how it's done. We only specify what we want it to look like. In the ARM template itself, we define the VM size, the storage account, the network public IP, VM extensions, monitorings if we want to attach it to, and so on and so on. We declare entire environment, and then this happens. I'm sure you all remember Captain Picard and his famous "make it so." And that's actually exactly what's happened. Basically, the ARM template that we create, it's a file that contains all the information that Azure Resource Manager needs to deploy such environment. For example, we define only what we want. I was giving example of virtual machine. So for the virtual machine, you define those things, right? You defined, I don't know, the name and so on, and where it will live. And then Azure Resource Manager, which I'm going to be talking more a little bit next, is make sure that everything happens in the background. And that's great because we don't worry about things like in which order we need to create things. Because here it knows and actually is doing it in the right order, so it never fails. If we are doing that with PowerShell, then what will happen is that if we try to create, let's say, virtual machine, and the resource group in which we are trying to create it doesn't exist, our code will fail. And I'm sure that everyone tried that once or twice and it failed because those things have some specific order. And with ARM templates, we don't have to worry about that at all. And so what is actually this ARM? So ARM stands for Azure Resource Manager, and it's a service actually that runs in the backend of Azure, and it provides to us like consistent management and deployment service that we can use, and all those tools that we are actually using are relying on it. Basically, we have those tools like Azure Portal, Azure PowerShell, CLI, so on, and all those tools actually tell to Azure Resource Manager what they want, And then if they want to create, delete, or change, and then Azure Resource Manager do that in the backend. And how that works? Well, it works, what I would like to explain here. Of course, I'm not trying to explain everything about Azure Resource Manager, but I think for the ARM templates, what's important to understand is that how it interacts with the resource providers. So what are the resource providers? Maybe I actually have the page open here. So resource providers are actually, we have like, I don't know, like 160 plus. I don't know how many of them are this right now. Last time I checked, it was like 161 or something like that. And each of those providers is managing some services. And so for us, for example, if you want to take a look at the compute resource providers, we will see that that resource provider compute is managing services virtual machine and virtual machine scale set. And so ARM is, we are creating our templates to work with this specific resource provider and to be able to interact with one of those services. And then the ARM, it's the middleman in the middle, which is actually doing this on the back end in a way that is scalable and used all across the Azure. And we are just using a tool on top of it to be able to interact with those. And as I said, we can like deploy, manage, delete, and so on. So that's just a little intro. A little intro to how this works. And if you remember from the last session, maybe I was talking about how Resource Graph Explorer interacts with the ARM, and that's exactly what happens here. Interacts directly with the API from the ARM, and that lets us work with things faster. Okay, so enough of enough of that. Now I'm going to switch to demo, and we are going to take a look how actually those ARM templates are created, how they work, what's their structure, and how we can use them. So there is one way to do it is here. If you go to template, just search for templates, and open this. This is now in preview still, but this is the place where we can look at the templates that we have created. And we can create them from here and change the code from here. I'm just going to show you quickly demo. We are not going to use the Azure portal because I don't think that interface is very good. Oh, this needs to be this. And what we see here is some basic template. As I said, we are not going to use this. Instead, we are going to use Visual Studio Code. I didn't delete anything. Okay. Sorry about that. Didn't clean my... Just testing that a few minutes ago. My Visual Studio Code is a little bit broken today, and I just find that out a few minutes before this, but it should be working fine. So I created a new file, and of course, this doesn't need to be Visual Studio Code. You can use actually any JSON editor, but the good thing about the Visual Studio Code is, of course, that you can add Azure extension that allows you to, it gives you a little bit more functionality for ARM templates itself. And if you just go to Visual Studio Code, type ARM, this will create a basic ARM structure for you. And you can see that there are a few different sections here. This schema, actually, no, I'm not going to cover all of them today because I don't think we have enough time to do that. So today we will just focus on a few sections. One is the resources section, and the resources section is the place where you will define your resources. And for that, you can see that this is array. You can see that from those. I can make that bigger probably. Can you see the? Can you see it enough? If not, please let me know. I will try to make things maybe light scheme or a little bit bigger. But basically, in resources, we define our resources. So for the virtual machine, we will define everything that is related to that virtual machine. And then there is, let's say, parameters, which is also important for us. If we want to create a code that we can use without hard coding the information inside, then we can use the parameters. And last week when we were talking about Azure policies, we were also using some parameters with it. Today in ARM templates, when you declare, let's say, the virtual machine, you have some things that are specific to that single virtual machine, like a name, for example. Right, that needs to be unique. And if you hard code that inside of your code in the resources part, then you get a template that can be used only for that one virtual machine, and you can actually not reuse it again, because if you try to reuse it in the same environment, it will fail because that virtual machine already exists. So instead of that, instead of using the hard-coded name, you can use parameters and put the parameter like virtual machine name. And every time you run your template, it will ask you to provide this parameter. And so you can reuse it to create many different virtual machines. Of course, it's some like higher level of automation. You can like even get this from, I don't know, from an Excel file or CSV file, and then give it in and create it in a loop and so on. So you don't have to manually run it every time and every time enter the name. But in the best practice is that inside of your variable ARM template, you shouldn't be hard coding information, and for that purpose you can use parameters. One more thing that I'm not going to cover today is that ARM templates can be one single JSON file, or they can be a combination of more files. And so how that works, if you create one file where you put everything, entire infrastructure, entire environment, then that's probably like the easiest way to do, because you just go put everything. You don't have to worry about the orders, because things will get created in order that works, which is taken care of by Azure Resource Manager. But what will happen in the end is that you will have a file or template that is very specific to that single environment, right? So if you create an environment that has this type of server, this type of network configuration, this type of balancing configuration, and so on, then it's great, but it's usable only for that single environment, and you cannot easily reuse it. But if you go in the path of combination of multiple files, then you can have, let's say, one file that is defining creation of virtual machines. Then you have another file that is defining creation of networking configuration. Then you have a third file that is defining creation of load balancing. And then you can combine those three individual files into one big one, and use that main file to link those templates and create one environment. But those, like individual small files, are actually reusable and can be used in any other environment if you need. You just need to create that like one file which will call those individual files. We are not going to cover that linking today because there is not enough time, but it is definitely something to look at if you want to go and dig a little bit more deeper inside of the Azure templates. Right, there's a baby crying. Okay, so how do we work with this file now? Of course, this, what you see here, can look scary, and it did look a little bit scary for me when I first time saw it. But the great thing is that, like, let's say Visual Studio Code helps you with things. So what are we going to create today? I was talking about creating the virtual machine, right? So let's say new. We luckily have here, ARM VM, and this is IntelliSense. It's already there inside of the Visual Studio Core extension that I installed, and it allows us, it gives us some hints and helps us creating things. So I just started typing that, and I got the resource definition. And I choose the virtual machine, and you can see here we now have definition of all sorts of things that are related to that virtual machine. And you don't need to get scared of this kind of code, because basically this is just a JSON that is defining what we want. We are not worried about how this is going to get created. And so let's look at those. So we have a storage account, we have a public IP, we have a network security group, we have a virtual network, we have a virtual network subnet, we have a virtual network interface, we have a public IP address, we have a virtual machine itself. And if we were creating this manually or by PowerShell, we would of course have to create all of those things. And this, what we have, or what we are creating here, is actually not required. We might have some of those things already created, so we don't have to create them again. Of course, that can be changed. But you can see that there are a lot of things here that are happening for us. So let's take a look at one of those, let's say a virtual machine. And for the virtual machine, we can see the name. And this, again, this is a hard-coded name that is there, and it's hard-coded in the code. Then we have a type. We can see that there is a there is a resource provider called Microsoft Compute, and then there is a resource type called virtual machine. If you were following the Azure Governance and Automation series, we mentioned those resource provider a few times. We used it in a few places, like creating like our Azure policies, or in the resource graph. And then there is a API version, which I will come back in a minute. And then there are other things like properties, which is a virtual machine size, hardware profile. Then there is OS profile, which gives us, you see, it's hard-coded here, username and password, and so on and so on. So you can see that each of those is basically like things are defined here. And you saw I didn't have to like write any of this. But the thing is that this VS Code extension only gave me like the basic thing. But let's go back here and look at this API version. So we are back to the virtual machine. So we can see that API version is some API. And you can see that each of those different resource types have their own API version. And what this is actually the API is the path that you use to configure things, and what's inside of it is defined and it's well documented. And I found that really, really useful place to look for. So if you go and search for, what did I search? ARM templates reference, you will get to this page, and maybe I can paste that page. Going to paste because I find that page very useful. And then here on the left-hand side, you can look at all those different resource providers. What we are interested is to compute. And then when you open it, you can see that there are different resources, and you see there are different resources, and what we were looking at is the virtual machine. And in here, you can see that the API version is the latest, and this is the definition of the file for that API version. So this is great because this page here gives you the complete definition, all the optional parameters and all the options that you can use for that specific resource type. And sometimes or oftentimes, when I create templates, I come back to this page to look at this structure, because basically this is the definition of your virtual machine, including everything. And of course, many times you will not need some things, but sometimes you want to add something extra, some extra configuration, and you can find all of that here. And of course, these things like this definition can change in a different API versions, and that's why your API version is defined there. And if you have some older templates that are working on a different API version, then you will find yours one and look at it, or you will upgrade the API version. Right, and so this is really nice page where you can always come and look for those things that you are creating. And of course, this is just one resource type. In our template here, we are not creating just a virtual machine, but for that virtual machine, we are creating networks and subnets and so on. And each of those resource types have their own API, and that API is defined in here. So you can look for all of that and find the full configuration for what you need. Very useful for me, at least. And so what happened here now? So I have a file called Azure Deploy JSON. You can name your file whatever you want. Just needs to be JSON. I'm going to save the file, and so right now I only have a resource virtual machine. That virtual machine currently has everything hard-coded because this was example that was pre-filled for me. Hard-coded the names, the addresses, the I don't know, the username and password, and so on. And so how can I deploy that now? Well, there is one way. I can just copy this code, this entire code, go back here to Azure portal and paste it here. Or I can deploy that directly from...
speaking.
Can we mute someone? Oh, here.
I do, yeah.
Okay. Right. So that's one of the ways to go here, paste it here, run it. I actually never done that. I did it for some testing purposes, but I don't like this interface very much because it's very limiting. It doesn't give you all this IntelliSense options and so on. So it's better to use your familiar environment that can also be any JSON file editor, or it can be VS Code, right? And so for this, I'm going to use AZ, and there is some error. Okay, let's clean that. I'm not going to dig into what's the error now. It was working a few minutes ago. If it doesn't work, I have a virtual machine that we can use. It works for sure. So first, you would like to type a command that will actually, what we are going to do is to deploy this file and give it to ARM, Azure Resource Manager, and let the Azure Resource Manager deploy that. And as I said before, this is a deployment. This is going to be a resource group deployment. What's actually I didn't mention, but it's maybe important still to understand, is that when we create something, when we try to create something with ARM, we have different scopes, and those scopes are like a resource group, subscription, management group, and tenant. And if we try to deploy this now to the resource group that doesn't exist, then that will not work. Right? In that case, I will have to go and deploy it under a subscription level, and include here creation of the resource group, right? So first thing you have to do is to go AZ login, and that will ask you to log in into Azure environment. I already did that. So I'm just going to do the deployment now, and that's actually very easy. So we go AZ deployment group. This is the group level. We are going to create deployment in the group, and I don't remember my Azure resource group name. That's funny. The resource group name is ARM demo. Okay, and then I'm going to use a template file, Azure deploy JSON. Okay, this is the file. It's inside of this folder. So if I do this, group. Okay, something's wrong with my something's wrong with my AZ here. This works. Group. Why wouldn't it work? Group. Let's take a look at the help file. And so it's broken. Okay, so let's do that a different way. While I troubleshoot my computer issue here, and I don't know why this happens today, it was working yesterday. What will this command create? And I'm sure that the command that is working is just something wrong here in my computer right now. What this command would do is that it will create a deployment. And if we go like here, in deployments, in my resource group, you will see that deployment here. And that deployment will be based on the ARM template that I created. So let's see how we can do that now. Can I do it maybe not from VS Code, but maybe just from a terminal? Just going to test that quickly. So I need this path. Oh, actually, you cannot see that. Right. Don't mention my background here. Don't have time to change that now. So AZ, is it working? No, it's the same thing. Okay, so my AZ is broken. Let's try that in the Azure portal now. So I'm just going to copy all of this, go back to Azure portal, which is here, go to templates, and create a new template. It's going to be arm new VM. Okay. Now I have to change the schema. And this should be okay. So now we have a new template. And of course, this is just a template. It's not a deployment yet. And we can go edit it. We can do something. But what we want to do with it is to deploy it. And the AZ command that I was running would actually do what am I doing here now. I'm actually not 100% sure that this will work because I never tested it. Right, that's okay. So validation errors. Oh my God. All right, so this is a live troubleshooting one-to-one. We don't have too much time. So what I would actually do here is that I would now have to go and change this name because it's the Windows and that's the trademark and so on. I really don't know why this is now happening. So let's go back here. Let's edit our template. Not this, but we want to edit template. And it's here, Windows. Save. And now let's go deploy it again. And let's see if this will work. Okay. Okay, I don't think we will be able to perform. Oh, I had the reference somewhere. Okay. Let's find it again. If it doesn't work, I will just continue with editing the template because that's why we are here. I think the deployment itself is the easiest part of it, so we are not going to spend too much time with that. So Windows, it will be somewhere here in the definition of the virtual machine. We are trying to use now the disk storage account somewhere. But I'm 100% sure that it will fail later on here again and so on. So, but it's good that this happened because we can now see that that the name itself is used as a reference later on. And if we use the parameter instead, then we wouldn't be worrying about replacing this in multiple places because we would just change the parameter and that will be reflected everywhere else, like a variable, let's say. So I'm not going to waste too much time with that. So let's do that. So if I did a deployment now from this, it would create a deployment and that deployment will then execute and it will create all of these resources in my resource group. Actually, I want you to see that. So let's do something a little bit more simpler. I deleted this one. And new ARM storage. Okay, so let's create this instead. What do you think about that? I'll go back here, delete all of this, and create something simpler, which is the storage. So you can see the creation of the resource, right? So this name is now wrong, but we don't have to worry about that. What I did is that I just used the pre-filled here creation of the storage account. It will be called storage account 1. That's probably not going to work, so I'm going to replace that a little bit. And you can see here that the type is storage accounts, and location and will be taken from the resource group, so I don't have to worry about adding that. And then there is a premium locally redundant storage, and it's a V2 storage, right? And you can see that again, there is an API here, and if we go look at that website that I posted, that you will see that there are many more options here, not just those are the basic ones. There are many more, right? So let's go back here. Change it the name, so we are sure that it doesn't fail because storage account needs to be unique. Just storage account, okay, save, and let's try deploy that now finally. Deploy in our resource group. This shouldn't fail, but there is. Oh, small letters. I am, of course, needs to use only small letters. One thing that I didn't mention is that when we were trying to deploy things, and I'm not going to be able to show you this here now from the portal, but there is also what if. And what if allows you, let's just finish here. What if allows you to actually see what will happen if you try to do something. So finally, we have a deployment in progress. How you would do that? So typically you would, instead of create, you would just use what if, and the result you would get is the result you would get from what if is what will change in case you run the template. And so that's a pretty new feature that it wasn't there before. For me, that is great because you are typically editing some kind of production environment, and you don't want to be running things in a way that you just tested what will happen. It's better, of course, if you know what will happen up front before that happens, and that can be achieved with the what if parameter that you use instead of create, and that allows you to see on the screen the changes that will happen. And so if we, for example, go and try to make a change, and that change would be the change of the, let's say, the VM size, and we run it with what if, it's the same file, it's the same template, but it would give us the change, what the template will change. So here we can see the deployment. This is our deployment. We can see that it was succeeded. We can even dig deeper inside of it, and we can look into deployment details. Then we can see that this storage account, we know that because it's Microsoft storage account is being created. And we can also see that this was finished. And if I go back to my resource group and see overview, you can see that there is a storage account that was created for me, and its parameters are storage v2, it's a premium, it's a locally redundant storage. And I know all of that because it was declared here. And this is your first ARM template in action. Of course, preferably you will be running it from here, not from the portal itself, but it's good that you have multiple options and you can run the tool again. However, this is, as I said before, this is something that is not very good, not the best practice, because everything is hard-coded here. And we don't like that. I don't like creating a resource that has a hard-coded option. So what we will do instead is that we will create a parameter. And creating parameters is easy. You say new parameter. You have to give it a name. So we will give it, let's say, storage name. And then it's a string. It can have a description, but let's say we don't need that description. And this is a storage account name parameter now. And now if I go here, and instead of hard coding the parameter, the storage account name, I can say parameter and then select the parameter name, which is storage account name. And this will actually allow me to use this template over and over and over again, because every time I do deployment, I will get a question, okay, type your storage account name. And so if I go back now to portal and create a new deployment, templates, add, I'm going to create a new, it's ARM new storage account with parameter, say okay, then I can replace this. And now I can save it, but you can see that we have a parameter here. And the parameter is storage account name, and it's a string. So I'm going to say that. Something is wrong again. But I'm not sure what. Did we copy paste everything? We did. Oh, I see what. Because there were multiple. Okay. No. Was this mandatory? I don't think so. Yeah. Okay, so I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. Oh, I do actually. You see those things you forgot many times? I think it should be like this. And it doesn't work still. Okay, troubleshooting a lot of today. Usually those are the simple things, but parameters, storage account, maybe I still have to put those in now. Let's see. I think I just copied something wrong here with the schema and so on. But let's not waste a lot of time on this now. So this is how you would use parameters, and when you run it, you will get the message saying, please enter storage account name, and this will be the message that will show. So that typically you would use the parameter name to be a little bit more descriptive, so you can easily then identify it. And of course here, if you're adding a description in it, that can be added and it can be used for you to better understand the file. And for everyone else that comes after you and try to work with the file, of course, that will be the great benefit if you add all descriptions and so on. Still, I'm not sure what I did wrong here. Storage account name. like this is a super easy definition. Sure, I don't need this and this, and in here the name is will be like this. Oh, okay. Don't see if there is any difference. No. Should have prepared this demo a little bit better. I apologize for that. So I think we are a little bit over the time now. So using parameters when you know how to use them, of course, is very important, or it lets you create more complex templates that are easy for you to reuse again. And if we had a template like this that is using storage account name instead of having the name here, then the failure that we got earlier telling us that it cannot run because the name is wrong will actually not affect us, because during the deployment procedure we will be able to make that change. Also, just one last thing to mention, those templates can be used not just to deploy things. So we saw that I deployed a storage account with a template from a template, and this is a storage account. But if I ever decide that inside of my code I want to make a change, then of course some things cannot be changed. Like, for example, you cannot rename the resource, and if you try to do that, the template itself will create a new resource instead. But if you try to edit existing resource, then of course there are some properties that can be changed. Like, for example, here in the storage account, there are like many things you can allow. You can create like containers, you can allow static website, you can allow public access point, and then you can make a configuration of things like HTTP or HTTPS and so on and so on. Or you can change, of course, type and so on. So I actually cannot change the type. There are a lot of things that can be edited with it, and if you keep everything consistent in the ARM templates, then it's very easy for you to actually go and make that change in the template, deploy the template, and end up here. Microsoft, if you search for ARM templates start quick start, you will find here on this, of course, there's a GitHub, but there is also a docs page where you will find a lot of quick start templates that you can easily use and deploy. And they are already pre-created for you. You can just use them as they are. I always recommend using it with what if. And if you are not able to understand what they are doing or what kind of change that will make on your environment, then always go and investigate what the code is doing and what change will happen before you, of course, blindly run things in your environment. I think that's enough for the demo. I really hope even the small demo that I showed, that it helped you to understand a little bit of the structure of the skeletons of the ARM templates, and what's the difference between using a PowerShell or using a declarative approach like this, where you just define sorry, my screens, what you want, and then make it so. Let's see if you have any questions. I'm sure you will have a lot of questions, because no. You don't. What is the ARM extension you are using in Visual Studio Code? So that ARM extension is used, it's called Azure Resource Manager. And if you go in here and try to try to find it. It will be Azure Resource Manager, this one. Let me just, yeah. And this allows you to work with JSON. And this is exactly what I showed. You can see here that if you just type ARM, it will give you automatically the template to create. And we were using the resource group, but again, you have a management group, subscription, tenant, and so on. Right, there is actually, hold on, we have to save the file. So I'm going to delete this. ARM subscription parameters. Oh, okay, not much. So I hope that answered your question. Thank you, Patrick. I really am sorry for the demo, but this was working today morning when I was testing it. And then like 5 minutes before, I started getting this error in the code, and I was not able to fix it in time. But I use ARM templates like daily, and it was always working. And you can see I'm on a Mac here, and I'm using VS Code on a Mac, and I don't need to have a specific virtual machine with Windows just for that purposes. I really hope that this showed at least how to start creating templates, that there is a difference between using PowerShell, where you have to define things that in order that you are doing that, or just declaring what you want. And of course, there is like those a little bit technical things like skeleton and schema of the template itself, and that you have to do the deployment first, and then the deployment will do whatever it is defined inside of the template. Also, you can redeploy your existing deployment, and you can, every time you redeploy it, you will be able to do all of your things again. Okay, thanks everyone. This was our last session in the series. I really enjoyed those Fridays, last 5 Fridays, entire series on automation and governance. And don't forget to check out our YouTube channel, and don't forget to check out different sessions that are available in the Cloud Lunch and Learn. Okay. Thanks everyone, and have a great day. Okay, Dana is having a microphone issues. I'm sure she wanted to thanks everyone for joining us and for sticking with us. I've seen many faces that were repeating and coming to all of those sessions, so that was great. And thank you, Dana, for being a wonderful support here and moderating everything. And that's it from me.